step coming in. Step coming in.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's resume the examination of the witness.
Thank you, Judge.
You're still under oath. You can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, yesterday we were talking a little bit, you talked a little about and described how you felt on June 18th, that evening when you were talking to the police, kind of felt like you were in a different world, for lack of a better term. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
You were kind of, I think you said floating and things like that, just as far as best you could describing how it felt that evening, right?
Right, that's exactly how I would describe it.
Okay. And you said you'd gone back and you've watched the interviews of you, and that just didn't even, it didn't appear, can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but you didn't even recognize that person, right?
I did not recognize myself, that's correct.
Okay. And I believe that's just, you would agree that looking at that, it struck you as odd, just looking at it objectively, okay, that's not me, that looks odd.
As an observer,
Yes.
just watching it, yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. Subjectively speaking, I mean, when you put everything in context later, understandable, but at the time, it looked suspicious at the time.
I would say it was odd.
Okay. And that's what the police were seeing at the time, correct?
I would assume so.
Okay. Now, also, do you remember at Little Apron Academy when you were there initially checking, when you went to try to check Cooper out, and you're kind of going back and forth trying to figure out what's going on? You remember making the statement, he has to be in the car, or that Ross had to have left him in the car?
I remember, yes.
Okay. And do you remember TJ and Kiata and other people being there trying to say to you, or saying to you, hey, you know, there could be a million other reasons, but you said at the time, he's got to be in the car.
He must have left him in the car.
Okay.
I don't remember what other people were saying to me.
Right.
I know that there were a lot of people around me
Right.
trying to help, but I don't recall exactly what they said to me.
And if Kiata was there and she said that you'd said that and other people had said that wouldn't be inconsistent with your memory that you had said he has to be in the car?
No, I said that.
Okay, okay. And in addition, do you remember being on the phone with your mother as well when you're in this floating state, kind of, you know, you're honestly, as you describe, I think, shocked. Your mom, you called her, correct?
She called me.
Okay, and when you told her, she freaked out, started screaming and things like that and crying.
She was very upset.
Okay, and she even responded like, why are you not crying, and things of that nature.
I don't remember what she said to me, but I do know that I said something to her
You-
about the fact that I was not crying.
Okay. You explained that to her, so obviously she had some concern about the way you were reacting, correct?
I'm really not sure. She did.
Okay.
I just can't remember.
Yes, ma'am.
But I know that I did say that to her.
Okay. And then you also, I believe you stated to the police during this time, you were worried that something like this might happen.
It was a fear of mine.
Okay. And then, when have you had a chance to listen? Well, let me ask you this: your first question, as soon as Detective Stockinger got to you at the tree house, do you remember that your first question to him was, "Where is my husband?"
After he told me about Cooper.
Okay. And do you remember your first question to him about that was, "Where is my husband?"
Yes, I remember that was my first question.
Okay.
because I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know what the circumstances were.
Yes, ma'am.
So when they told me that about Cooper, my next concern was, is my husband okay?
Right, and then and you also asked him, am I going to get to see my husband? You asked him that as well.
I did.
Okay. And you also had voiced to him, you'd said, I don't know how we're going to make it through this. Do you remember that?
I remember saying that. I don't remember saying that several times, but I've seen it in the transcript.
Okay. Now, you said yesterday that you tried to figure out where Cooper was in your Cobb County headquarters, and that you had no idea where he was.
Right. I didn't know at that time. It was so overwhelming and so confusing. I just didn't know where he would be. That's not something that's ever crossed my mind.
Right. And so yesterday you testified on direct that you had no clue once you got to Cobb County what was going on with your child, anything like that, and then you tried to ask somebody at Cobb headquarters, where's my son, what's happening to him, and things like that, and then that person did not respond.
I believe I asked two different people. The first one was just somebody that I kind of caught on the way out through the little office area, and I believe his response was along the lines of, you'll need to speak to the detective about that.
Right.
And in the interview room, I didn't ask that question.
Okay.
I did have Detective Stoddard come back out in the lobby with me after I was waiting to get my key back to my apartment.
Right.
And I asked him several more questions then. I asked him where Cooper was, if I could see him, what the number was, and also where Ross was going and the number to that place.
And did he tell you those things?
He told me that Cooper was at the medical examiner's office, and he gave me the number, and he told me where Ross would be going.
Okay. And you remember Ross telling me that he thought Detective Stoddard and everybody treated him fairly as far as the police, except for the one officer who put handcuffs on him because he yelled at her.
Well, I don't even think we discussed, I can't remember if we discussed that in the room.
Okay. Let me ask you this. When's the last time you reviewed that video of you and the defendant in the room?
It thoroughly, the entire thing,
Yeah.
more than 6 months ago.
Okay. But if it's reflected in there and the jury saw in there that he had actually told you that you'd been treated nicely and professionally and all that, you wouldn't disagree with what's on the video?
I'm not going to dispute what's in the video. That's there. I can't remember if that was something that he told me in the room.
Yes, ma'am.
He has experience with his brother being in law enforcement, and so his idea of that time is basically they're doing their job. They're trying to figure out what happened today.
Right.
We understand that this is the process.
Okay. And I know a lot was going on and everything, but yesterday on direct, when you said that nobody had told you up to that point where Cooper was, that's not true, is it?
No, at the point when I was interviewed,
Yeah.
nobody had told me where Cooper was, that I can remember.
Okay.
I don't remember somebody telling me, your son is at the medical examiner's office.
All right. Have you listened to Detective Stockinger's conversation with you, the audio tape of it at the treehouse?
I have.
Okay. Do you remember that he actually told you that he volunteered it to you that Cooper was going to be going to the medical examiner's office and things like that back on that first meeting?
Okay. And I didn't remember that once I got to the police headquarters.
Okay.
And honestly, I don't remember it now. I was able to listen to that a few weeks ago. It's very difficult for me to listen to.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just don't remember that specific part.
When you said that nobody told you that, if that's in that recording and Detective Stockinger tells you that, then you would have been incorrect telling the jury that nobody told you early on that the child was going to the medical examiner's office.
That would be correct.
Okay.
I just don't remember.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Now, when you talked to Detective Stoddard about everything, you remember a lot of your conversation you discussed with him, you were worried about how you and the defendant, or how the defendant more importantly, how he was going to heal and recover.
That was a statement that I made.
Okay, and you were worried about how best to react for the defendant when you went to see him, correct?
That was something that was on my mind, yes, sir.
And you said you were scared for the future and what would, you were scared about the future. And then you remember Detective Stoddard asking you about, were there domestic issues or anything like that? And then
Yes.
you explained, no, I'm scared for I believe, your relationship with the defendant and how y'all were going to move forward as a couple.
I do remember that.
Okay.
I think, I don't know how we're going to get through this. I don't know how anybody gets through this.
Right. You would agree that in watching the interview with Detective Stoddard, your main concern was your future and how it was going to go forward with the defendant. Would you agree with that from reviewing it?
I wouldn't agree with it because I know how I was feeling at the time. But
Let's
as
look
an
at what you were
observer-
saying.
Judge,
Yes.
I'm going to object. She should be allowed to answer the question.
I don't really think she answered with a yes or no, but she can explain, that's fine, so.
Judge, he's interrupting her. She's attempting to answer, and he doesn't like where the answer is going. He's interrupting her. She's got the right to answer the question that was posed.
Well, it was unresponsive.
Let me ask you this. Looking at that interview, your main concern as far as what you're saying is your future with the defendant and how y'all are going to move forward. Would you agree with that?
It appears that way as an observer.
Okay.
If you were inside me,
Yes, ma'am.
then it's a little different.
And I know, we're talking to you now, kind of giving the explanations, but what we had back then on the 18th of June was what objectively we see in that video, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. And you remember asking the defendant when you were back with him, you know, is he going to want more kids and things like that?
I know because I've read it in the transcript.
Is that something that doesn't stick out in your head, but you know it because you reviewed it?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, do you remember, I know this was all a whirlwind, when you got home, you said you got into Cooper's bed and cried, right? Azura was there as well?
She was with me.
Okay, and do you remember to Azura telling her and talking to her about the fact of how worried you were about talking mostly about the defendant and him losing his job, and also about whether he would want to have more kids? Do you remember saying those things to her as well?
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Okay. She wouldn't have any reason to lie about that, though, right?
I wouldn't assume so.
Okay. And when you said to the defendant in that statement, I know you specifically looked for that or remember that, did you say too much comment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and objectively, that looks odd.
It was an odd thing to say.
Okay,
Yes.
and the defendant then responded that all he did was tell the police about the timeline for the day. Do you remember him saying that back to you?
I can't remember specifically what he said.
Okay. And did you find out he did not tell the police a lot about several of his activities that day, including the messaging in the morning, the messaging in the afternoon, going back to the car at lunch? Did you know at that time that he had not told the police all those things?
I didn't know any of those things at that time.
Okay.
So,
Okay. And you talked a little bit about yesterday about the defendant, his personality and things like that. Let's see. First of all, I know you were in this state there at the police station and things of that nature. Kind of the lead up to that is at Little Aprons, you were already worried about what was going on and what was going to happen, correct?
I knew that something was wrong.
Yeah, and but you obviously you were not at the scene when at Acres Mill, correct?
No, sir.
Okay, and so you hadn't actually been the one to see Cooper or anything like that, and you weren't the one responsible for his death, correct?
Correct.
So going back to the defendant's demeanor and things like that, do you remember him actually saying to you as well that what he wanted you to do, one of the things was help him get out of jail so he can go be an advocate?
I do. I think I do remember that from reviewing it.
Okay.
I don't remember it on my
And,
own.
and when you talked about the PSA yesterday, I think you talked about a PSA. Was that when you were talking about a TV show with somebody who this had happened to and they were an advocate and things like that for not leaving your child in a car or look again, things of that nature?
Are you asking me what were we talking about specifically in that room?
No, I'm sorry. Yesterday when you talked about that you and your husband had seen a PSA about children in cars and things like that.
Yes, we saw, it was on the morning news, it was Atlanta news coverage,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that it was the Look Again campaign.
Okay. And basically, and the defendant voiced a desire to be an advocate about this type of thing in the hours after this had happened, correct?
I
To
believe,
you. Okay.
I believe that is correct.
Now, we talked a little bit about kind of what happened after. The next day, the police, I believe that they called your mother, correct?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm very sorry.
In any event, it's understandable. But you would, even if the police tried to attempt to contact you, you were not going to speak to them after this, correct?
I was in a state of mind
Mhm.
that I was pretty much letting people answer my phone,
Mm-hmm.
talking to family, taking care of things.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just don't remember receiving a phone call or making any decision like that.
Do you remember back then that the defendant's brother, Michael, who works in law enforcement, was basically going to be the voice, or we're going to handle things like that?
I remember that he helped me handle a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume that would have been one of them.
Do you remember a discussion that basically anything from law enforcement, they were going to ask law enforcement or anybody else to contact the defendant's attorney?
I do remember that it was recommended
Okay.
for that to be. I don't know where that came from.
Okay.
And I don't know where it started.
All right. Now, obviously, I haven't had a chance, the opportunity to talk. We asked to try to meet with you, talk with you. And as you're right, you chose not to speak with us, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, speaking with the defense, how often, I guess, over the last almost 2.5 years, have you met with the defense attorneys for Mr. Harris?
I don't have a number. Obviously, it was more often in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
just trying to help me get my feet back under me.
Mhm.
After that, it was less often. I mean, 6 to 8 months in between.
Okay. And when's the last time that you have actually met with? Have you met with them since you've been down here?
Yes.
Okay. And did you meet with them last night?
No.
Okay. Did you review anything last night in preparation for today?
I did. I have the transcript for the interview, my interview.
Mhm.
But I wasn't able to look over it.
You had it, but you just weren't able to watch it or anything like that?
I had the transcript,
Okay.
and I couldn't,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
was too overwhelmed.
Yes, ma'am. And how often have you met with them since how long have you been down here? You've just been down here a couple of days?
We came down Saturday.
Okay. And they talked to you about all the questions that they were going to ask and the questions that I might ask and things like that, correct?
We met with them once.
Okay. And yesterday, you knew where they were going to be coming from with their questions and things like that. Would that be fair to say?
That would be fair to say.
Okay. Now, at any point, do you remember, did they ever record any statements that you gave to them or anything like that over the years?
No, sir.
And you haven't been given a copy of the discovery in the case or anything like that to go through and review. So while you've watched some of the case, as you're entitled to during the trial as a family member of a victim, you haven't watched all of the evidence and seen all the evidence that's come out in the case, correct?
No, I haven't seen. Are you asking me if they showed me or if I've seen some?
Now, throughout the trial, you haven't seen everything that's happened in the courtroom.
I have not seen everything that's happened in the courtroom.
Okay, and do you know if the defense has shown you everything or every piece of evidence in the case and gone through every computer thing or anything like that?
I would not know that, no, sir.
Okay. Now, you talked a little bit about June 30th when they came to do a search warrant at your house. You remember talking about that a little bit yesterday?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you understand that they had a duty as law enforcement to come in and execute a legal search warrant on your house, right?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay. So they didn't come in breaking your door down or anything like that. You just
No.
thought they were kind of cold, I guess.
It was a very scary, very intimidating
Mhm.
circumstance.
And is that because they did anything particular, like to you, or was it just being in that circumstance, having never gone through it?
I think it was the way that they approached me as I opened the door.
Mhm.
I was very polite as I opened the door, and I felt like it was, it was a statement that was very similar to, well, we have a warrant, we're coming in whether you want us to or not.
Right.
And I understand that that's their job, but after everything that I had been through up until that point, it did seem cold to me. It seemed, they knew what I was going through. They knew what I had lost, and there didn't feel to be any sympathy on their part.
And this was after y'all didn't open the door initially, mistakenly thinking they were the media, correct?
That is correct.
So I guess an objective person might see that as you guys were not wanting to cooperate. Not saying you were or anything like that, understanding what you were going through, but an objective person could see that as y'all being an obstacle or obstructing them in some
Well,
way.
that objection, that calls for speculation. He can argue that later if he wants to, Judge.
That's right, boss.
So would you agree with that?
As an outside observer,
Yes.
not knowing me and what I had been through,
Yes, ma'am.
I could see how it would be seen that way.
Okay.
It was a matter of minutes.
Yes, ma'am. We talked a little bit yesterday about the vacations you guys were planning and things like that.
That's right.
I'm going to ask you, well, first of all, let me ask you a few questions about, I guess, y'all's work, defendant's work history, things like that, and kind of finances. The defendant was actually, he started becoming pretty upset about his job. Would you agree, back in March, going back that far even?
I would say that he was not satisfied with the direction that it was going. He had been there, do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, he had been there for a while,
Mhm.
and he felt like some things had needed to have changed as far as promotional.
Mhm.
And so he was a little frustrated with that aspect of it. Enjoyed the work that he was doing,
Yeah.
but frustrated with the limitations.
Because he wasn't getting a good work review, I guess, is what it was. He had his one-on-one meeting in March.
He didn't get a bad review,
Mhm.
but I think he felt like it should have been a time where he should have been promoted from, I think it was a developer 1 to a developer 2. There were developers that had been there before him, or that had come there after him,
Right.
that had already been moved up to the next developer level, and I think that was discouraging to him.
Right. I mean, he thought he deserved a raise and a promotion at that time.
Yes,
Okay. And he was unhappy about that. You would agree with that?
he was very discouraged by it.
Okay. And then he applied at Chick-fil-A in May and was turned down on May 12th as well for the job he applied for with Chick-fil-A, correct?
I'm not sure of the exact date, but that sounds about right.
And he was pretty depressed about that too. Would you
He was
agree?
upset, yes.
And that was the same day that he had to install the car seat, the frontward-facing car seat. Frontward, I don't even know if that's a word. The front-facing car seat. He installed that into his car because you left with the base, correct? Is it in that same text string?
I think it was the same day. I think the car seat happened first.
Yes, ma'am.
And then later on in the day, maybe noon or so, he received the news that he did not get the Chick-fil-A job.
And even as recently as the day before and the day of, were you aware that he was in conversation about trying to get a new job with Nathaniel Coyle's group and things like that?
I think that I might have been the one that recommended that,
Mhm.
based on a text that I remember seeing. I believe I said something along the lines of, I heard that Nathaniel's company's
Right.
hiring.
And so even as far as that day, did you know that he actually sent a resume to Nathaniel Coyle looking for another job?
I don't remember that. He could have told me at the time, and I could have lost it and everything.
Now, back at this time, I think, were you not getting the hours that you wanted with your job at DeVita?
There was a role that I was in.
Mhm.
It was a divisional lead dietitian role. They allocate hours for that role,
Mm-hmm.
and the role was a large responsibility, and the hours did not match with the responsibility.
Yeah, and you were pretty unhappy about that, obviously, because when you had that much responsibility, you should probably be paid for it, right?
I was frustrated with the fact that they couldn't give me additional hours.
Now, there was some discussion with you actually going to another schedule than working more to get paid like that. Do you remember that as far as text conversations?
I remember reading the text conversation. It was,
May 29th, something like that?
I don't remember the date. I can talk a little bit about the conversation if you
Was
want.
it one that you talked about, you were thinking about this? Do you remember the defendant wasn't exactly like super happy about it? Do you remember that?
I don't, happy about me
Having,
increasing.
working more hours, yes.
He wasn't happy about me increasing hours?
Yes.
The goal for us was for me to stay home with future children,
Mhm.
be able to stay home by the time we had a second child.
Right.
So I don't remember that specifically, but I could understand why that might be a response to him because he knew what we wanted as a family.
Right. And so the response, he would not have been happy that you were actually going to be working more.
Because he knew that that's not what I wanted.
Okay. And if you were working more, that would have been more responsibility on him at home as well. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay.
The responsibilities were very even. It would probably have stayed the same. At that time, I was already working
Mhm.
somewhere between 20 and 30 hours a week. It just ranged because I was covering different areas.
You-
So it wouldn't have changed.
Okay. You talked about the whole house buying thing. You said the defendant was in charge of that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you guys, obviously, you needed a down payment. You knew y'all don't have the money. You did not have a down payment. You could not purchase a house at that time.
I didn't believe that we were ready.
And you know, the defendant actually emailed Roger Webb in May as well, telling him that y'all were not immediately going to purchase anything. He would keep Roger basically in the loop, but y'all were not going to be buying anything anytime soon.
I
Have you
think
seen
that
those
was,
emails?
I think that was after a conversation that we had regarding the fact that I didn't feel like we were quite ready. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to rush into purchasing a home.
Mhm.
We had a home before and had to sell it under some pretty tight circumstances, and I wasn't quite ready to go back down that road until we were fully prepared.
And have you seen that email? Did you know that he sent that email in May to Roger Webb?
I haven't seen the email.
Okay. Were you told about it by the defense?
I honestly can't remember.
Okay. When y'all were prepping, did you talk about this specific issue?
Not about this email.
No, but about the specific issue.
About purchasing a home?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the defendant, that email, obviously, he didn't copy you on that email or anything of that nature saying that y'all weren't ready to buy.
I don't remember if I'm not copied.
So at that point, I mean, let's see, the defendant was running, he was running the show as far as finances, the budget, about the 6 months leading up to June 18th, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so basically, you know, y'all both made, y'all weren't poor by any stretch of the imagination, but you remember some conversations between you and the defendant where you had concerns about finances.
I've always been concerned about finances.
You remember the defendant talking about wanting to buy guitars and things like that, as people might want to do.
He talked about buying guitars a lot.
And you remember he actually went to the Super Bowl and y'all had a discussion, not Super Bowl, geez, Sugar Bowl, where he said that he wanted to go with his father to go there, and y'all discussed about what, it was basically going to be that or Cooper's TV.
I'm sorry, I don't remember
You don't remember that? Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. That would have been obviously back in December of 2013. You don't remember that text conversation?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember talking about him trying to sell a bass guitar and y'all selling an Xbox and things like that to try to make extra money?
He would sell things from time to time that he was not using.
Okay. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't really think I was going to say anything else. I think I just said
Okay. And you said you had no way when he started budgeting. He would have cash on him when he could have cash on him, but you had no idea to know how much cash he'd have on him at any time or what he was spending it on or anything like that, correct?
The only thing that I would know if he was spending would be a debit transaction
Mm-hmm.
that I may see on our bank statement online.
Okay. And did you guys have separate accounts or was it one joint account?
It was one joint account. Everything was joint.
So back then, you know, you guys didn't have money for a down payment or anything, so you guys were, I'm sure, you know, conscious and worried about money. You weren't trying to spend a lot of extra money for things, you know, just extravagantly, correct?
We weren't living extravagantly. He went back to school later as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
so we were getting to the point where we were having a little money in savings. We had a little bit in savings, but it wasn't, it was between $5,000 and $6,000,
Okay. And
if I
y'all-
remember that correctly.
I think you're right. I think it was about 6 to be fair. And you guys had a credit card, like 4,000 on credit card and things like that, kind of evened out, and then student loans, that kind of thing.
Correct.
Okay. But you guys, obviously, y'all were not trying to do anything extravagant, correct? Like
I
you
didn't want
said.
to do anything extravagant.
Okay. Now, you talked about it, that the defendant was the one who wanted to make it happen as far as that, the cruise.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to show you what a mark for identification purposes is, states 932. Showing you States Exhibit 932. You recognize States Exhibit 932 by the people's names involved, phone numbers, and then that conversation on June 9th.
Yes, I just can't tell who's sending what.
Yes, ma'am. And does that appear to be a fair and accurate representation of a conversation with people who would have been involved talking about the possible cruise on June 9th? Not the cruise on June 9th, the conversation on June 9th.
Yes.
Your Honor, I tender States Exhibit 932.
I really thought that was already in, so I'm not going to object to that.
All right, we just need to double check it's not different.
Okay, thank you. All right. Ma'am, looking at it at the bottom here, actually, we'll start at the top. It looks like it's starting to go down here from this way. With this person, if this is a defendant's phone, with it sent, that would be from his phone to you, Amy Bajents, and Michael Bajents, correct?
Yes, the names are under the number. Yes, I see that.
Okay.
Yes.
And then he sent out a text saying, okay, let's talk about a cruise. I want this to happen bad, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then he talked about a travel agent. He talks about that, trying to put together some stuff. And then Michael talks about dates because he's got the academy and training and things like that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you said he wanted it to happen, he actually said in this text, I want this to happen. Kind of using the same language you used yesterday, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, going back to those dates, do you know, did you learn that Amy Bajents had actually texted him on the 17th of June about the vacation?
I wouldn't have remembered. I would have known that.
Okay. So you weren't aware that she texted him and he responded that, oh yeah, I'm just waiting to hear back.
I don't remember that.
So, okay. So you're not aware the defendant actually told her that he had not followed up yet?
I wouldn't have been aware of that. I
Okay.
just don't know. I'm sorry.
And have you ever seen or were you copied on the emails between the defendant and Heather Coyle regarding this vacation?
I don't remember.
Okay. You don't remember?
If I was, then there should be a record of it. I just don't remember.
If the emails are in evidence and your name's not on there, you weren't involved, correct?
I wasn't copied on the email, correct?
Okay. And you never got it, you don't have any evidence that that email was ever forwarded to you on June 18th? Any response from Heather Coyle?
Whether Heather sent me an email,
Whether the defendant forwarded you an email from June 18th?
I don't remember.
Okay. But you were definitely not shown any email and you haven't seen any email where you got something forwarded to you by the defendant on the day of June 18th, correct?
I haven't seen anything.
Okay. Now, if you guys are going to be on this cruise, it was going to be you, Cooper, and the defendant in a cabin, correct?
That would be that would make the most sense.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's so, and that's 3 of y'all, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, y'all were talking about a cruise. It can be, sometimes it can be kind of pricey, so y'all were looking for something to keep your budget down to a degree, correct?
Yes, the concern was Michael's family is very large. It was 6
Mhm.
of them, so we were trying to keep the expenses as a total
Mhm.
on the lower end so that we could all
Right.
go.
Right. There was no reason y'all would be looking for VIP status or some grand suite, like the top of the line thing with all this crazy stuff, correct? Just the
I
three of
can,
y'all?
I can put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
If I were the one looking into the cruise,
Mm-hmm.
I would never have looked at that kind of stuff because I would know that we could not afford it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's Ross looking into it, that's very much something that he would do.
Okay. And have you been prepped for this question too?
No,
Nobody's asked you about this at all?
no,
Nobody's talked to you about the vacation and what you
about the
Googled?
vacation,
Yeah.
but not about this specific line.
All right. Would you have ever allowed him to go in and spend thousands of dollars in VIP service for a room on a vacation with just you, Cooper, and him?
It would have been extravagant, and I'm not an extravagant person.
And also, it would make no sense for a room for 5 people, for you 3 to stay in a room for 5 people, correct?
It wouldn't make sense unless he was thinking along the lines of, what if we all had a cabin together, the entire family, so we're not separated at night? That's the,
And if the whole family, that would have been Michael, and they got like 6 people, right?
yes, but I don't know how many rooms, how many people specifically could be in those rooms.
If it's a room for 5, it didn't make any sense for you, Cooper, and defendant to be in a room for 5 people, correct?
Unless he was looking at it to see if it would be capable for us to all be in a cabin together.
Okay.
That's my explanation.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. There's no way, if it's a cabin for 5 people, to fit the 3 of you and then the entire Bajent's family. Agreed?
I'm not going to disagree with you. I mean, if it's for 5 people, it doesn't add up numbers-wise.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about sandals and things like that. I guess back when you went to the Dominican, he was interested in sandals and things of that nature.
We looked at a lot of different locations. I do know that sandals had come up at some point
Mhm.
in the last years that we were talking about vacations.
Okay. And, but you hadn't talked with the defendant about a specific vacation with just the 2 of you.
We talked about taking vacations a lot.
Mhm.
That is something that we wanted to do as a family and also as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say that we didn't have that conversation. I just don't remember. I don't
Okay.
remember it specifically.
Okay. Now, you talked a little bit about in May, the trip to the beach for Memorial Day. And you talked about the initial text conversation with Mr. Abdo. The defendant had talked about him having somewhere to stay on Tybee, I think it was.
Yes.
And then he talked about in that text that he did not want to take Cooper, but you did want to take Cooper.
That's correct.
And that he wanted it to be an adult trip, correct?
I don't think he ever said that. I think that it was just the fact that Jason and his girlfriend did not have kids to make it an adult trip. But I don't think I'm not sure if those were the words that were used.
Okay. You remembered pretty specifically about that text yesterday, but you were asked about some texts between you and Amy Bajents. I think you were a little fuzzy on that yesterday, correct?
I am.
Okay.
Very fuzzy on that.
And you realize that you stated in that the defendant in those texts with Amy Bajents, he wanted an adult trip and you didn't.
Are you talking about the one that, I'm sorry, I'm getting the 2 trips confused.
I'm
There was-
talking about the Memorial Day one that you went on with them.
Because they were not going to have children with them, that's what I remember. Because they were not going to have their children with them, to make that an adult trip.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as States Exhibit 931. Okay. Ms. Harris is going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as States Exhibit 931. Looking at that, I know this writing, it's off a different format from your iPad, I believe. 205-394-0098, that's Amy Bajents, correct?
I don't know the number by heart.
We'll look at it in context to see, and me, if this was from your phone, that would be you, correct?
Is it 5128?
That would be the phone, yes,
Yes,
5128.
that's-
Okay, and the iPad that was seen, that was an iPad that you use regularly, correct?
It was my iPad, yes.
Yes, and there were text messages and things like that backed up from your phone to that computer,
Okay.
correct? All right, now, I'm turning your attention to, would have been May 14th and then May 15th. Just gonna ask you, if this is 4 hours earlier, the times are 4 hours earlier, since this is you, from a computer and not a phone, if that would be 9:38 a.m., correct? And it would be on the 10th, not the 15th, but the 14th. Okay, I'm gonna ask you to read this and then read this silently to yourself, and let me know that if you can confirm that's you and Amy Bajan's talking, obviously from the context.
Okay, read just here and here.
Yeah, just those two, just silently to yourself, and just look up at me when you're done.
Okay, just those two texts.
No, I'm not gonna ask you to read it out loud
Okay.
yet. First, okay, to see if we can enter it into evidence. Looking at that, in that context, you agree that that is a conversation between you and A.B. Bajans about the vacation y'all were about to take Memorial Day during that weekend?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I can tender State's Exhibits 931.
My understanding is that came off of Leanna's iPad. Is that right?
That's what I just told you 2 minutes ago, yes.
Leanna's iPad. Other than subject to any prior objections, arguments that we've had to that, I don't have any additional objections.
All right, it's admitted.
So, Leanna, looking at back now, does that give you do you now remember what you said?
It refreshes my memory on the conversation.
Okay, and you said it would have been the 14th of May at 9:38 p.m., given the 4 hours and went back. By the way, Ross is trying to get my mom to keep Cooper beach weekend, so we can have an adult weekend. But I'm on the fence. I want Coop with us. I want to see him have fun playing on the beach. Plus, I want you guys to spend time with him. Okay, that's what you said to Amy on that day, correct?
Right.
So he did use the term, he wanted an adult weekend, even in regard to going to vacation with the Bajans, correct?
I know that's the term that I used, I just don't remember what he used.
Okay. Well, that's what
He's
you
trying
said.
to make it an adult weekend.
You stated he wanted an adult weekend, that's what
I
it
stated,
says.
yes.
Yeah, okay. And you're saying that is what he said, correct?
That is what he said.
Okay. And then you actually, I think you said yesterday that you left it to to the defendant to call your mom to try to coordinate that?
I did.
Okay. And he did in fact text your mom and ask her to keep Cooper, correct?
He did.
Okay. Let's see. Right. Now, you talked a little bit about your knowledge of and discussions with the defendant regarding emails and notices about children being left in cars, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, do you remember yesterday on direct, the defense attorney asked you and you directly, immediately went off talking about the fact that you and the defendant had discussed the issue of children being left in cars?
Yes, because it was a fear of mine.
Okay. And so that's a yes?
Yes.
Okay. So did you guys receive emails
Did we receive emails from?
about like PSAs, things like that? Do you remember receiving any?
I don't remember receiving any emails.
Did the defendant ever tell you that he received emails in April and May about the Look Again campaign and things like that?
It's very possible that he told me, and I don't remember.
Okay. Specifically, you did talk about seeing an advocate on TV, that public service announcement, correct?
Yes.
And you and the defendant, when's the last time that you guys had actually talked about the issue of children being left in cars?
During, when we saw the announcement on the news, the public service announcement on the news.
Okay. And so he's familiar with those campaigns and things like that, so he was familiar with the issue. If you're worried about leaving your child in the car, you need to put something to remind you in there, or you need to look again and things like that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And did he talk to you about a video that he had watched 5 days before Cooper's death online?
I don't remember him telling me about it.
Okay. So as far as you know, he did not talk to you about it?
I just don't remember. He could have.
All right. And this video, do you know, it talks about how a living being, they give an example of a dog could pass away in a car in a short amount of time?
I've heard people talk about this video, but I haven't watched it.
Okay. With windows cracked, trees by it, breeze going, that can happen?
That it could
From that
harm
video.
somebody?
Right.
Yes.
Did the defendant ever tell you that he thought about Cooper when he watched that video 5 days before Cooper's death?
I don't remember him ever telling me that.
Okay. We talked about the car seat a little bit. You actually bought the forward-facing car seat in March, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So you knew you were going to need it soon.
Yes.
And that car seat could face forward and, I guess, could also be rear-facing, correct?
It could.
All right. And at that point, y'all went ahead and put it forward-facing to start with?
Bought it in March and put it forward-facing mid-May.
Okay. When he had to install it. So you had it for a couple months and then you put it in March?
Yes, I believe.
I mean, in May, I'm sorry.
Right, in May. I believe we tried to install it rear-facing a few times without success.
Mhm.
We were not able to get it in the car safely. It was still moving on the seat,
Mhm.
and it was important for it to be very secure in the seat.
Right.
And so we then turned it around and tried it forward-facing to see if we could install it then, because at that point I was thinking, well, maybe I need to take this car seat back and
Right.
get it installed properly. And we were able to get it installed forward-facing.
Right. And it worked.
It worked, yes.
And when you said that, it's good to keep a child rear-facing until they're 2, it didn't necessarily mean in an infant car seat, correct? Just a rear-facing car seat until 2.
I would agree with that.
And you talked about the weight limit. Did you read the instructions to the Chico Key Fit?
I knew about the weight limit.
Okay. Did you know that there was a limit of 30 inches and the child could not be more than 30 inches to be in that car seat?
I did not know what Cooper's height was at the time.
Okay. Did you know that the height limit was 30 inches?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you know that his height when he went to the doctor in March was 31 inches?
I don't remember that, I'm sorry.
Okay. But you kept up with his growth chart and his tracking and things like that, correct?
I just don't remember what his exact height was.
Okay. But if he would have been too tall for the regulations of that car seat, would you agree with that? If he's,
According
yes.
to
Okay.
the regulations, yes, sir.
And you're aware he was 33 inches at the time of death. Were you aware of that?
I didn't know exactly.
And however the car seat was positioned on June 18th, when the car pulled into Acres Mill, that would be the best approximation of how that car looked and how that car seat looked at the time the defendant was driving it on that day, correct?
If it's right after
Mhm.
he finds Cooper,
Right after, yes.
yes, it would be.
Now the photos, we saw a couple of photos of car seats. I think the defense showed you. The first one, State's Exhibit 172. That's Cooper in the car seat, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and this is 2 months before June 18th. It was April 20th, correct?
it was April 20th.
And it appears his head is almost at the top there. Would you agree with that, looking at this?
I can't see it, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
To me, it looks to be about 2 inches below it.
Okay. And this was closer to the March doctor's appointment than in June, correct, if it was in April?
I really don't know.
Okay. But it looks like, obviously, this is an angle looking up, correct? Whoever's taking this picture is in front of him, and the driver would be above him, correct?
I'm just trying to think about it if I were someone taking the picture. It would always kind of be a down shot.
Okay.
If you're sitting at a seat next to him,
Mhm.
it would be a down shot.
So you're looking at him kind of either down or something.
Or
of that
straight
nature,
forward. It's definitely not exactly straightforward because it's at an angle.
Right, and you can't see anything about what the angle of the driver is or anything of that nature, correct?
I wouldn't be able to make that.
Okay. And obviously, this is 2 months before June 18th, so there were 2 months in between, correct?
2 months, yes.
Okay. And yesterday, you can't be sure even whose car that is, correct? You just know it was in Marietta.
I think based on the steering wheel,
Mhm.
it would be more likely to be the Tucson,
Mhm.
but I'm not 100% on that.
And Defense Exhibit 176, Cooper's head's kind of, he's sleeping. And in that picture, that's just so we're clear, that picture is the forward-facing car seat, correct?
It is.
Okay, so if you're in the rear-facing car seat, obviously his head's not gonna hang like that when he's sleeping, correct?
It would hang to the side when he slept.
Okay.
It wouldn't hang forward.
Correct.
And to the side.
Right, if
But
he was in the
it would
rear-facing, it
hang.
might turn this way or that way.
But he did sleep like this a lot.
Okay, and obviously, you guys knew that the rear facing that he was in was not as comfortable as a forward facing for him, correct?
I can say this, I installed it in my car for the trip to Alabama in June
Mm-hmm.
because it was easier for me to see him, it was easier for me to access him, easier for me to, just pull my rearview mirror down and see, okay, is he asleep, is he happy, is he playing, what's going on?
And now, you testified to this is again a little over 2 years since then. You've met with the defense attorneys numerous times about these issues with the car seat, correct?
I don't know how many times.
But it'd be a lot more than 1 or 2, would you agree with that?
Probably.
Okay, and you talked about these car seat issues. Did you know the defendant on the day of the incident said that you guys switched the car seats at that point because the forward-facing one was more comfortable? And they did that, you guys did that because you were going to Alabama. Not because of this other reason, but because it was more comfortable for them.
I don't remember that myself.
But a statement made immediately after it would be a better recollection than you sitting here 2.5 years, correct? 2.5 years later?
Judge, I'm going to object. I don't know how this witness would know what somebody else's statement was a better recollection.
I'll ask it a different way. Would you agree that a statement made by somebody immediately after something like this would be more accurate than another statement 2.5 years later?
I'm gonna object. It's still speculation. He's asking her to comment on somebody else. She can comment on her own statement, whether or not she thinks her prior statement may be more accurate than her current statement, but not someone else. Speculation.
I think it's a fair question, Judge.
Any objection?
Would your memory, as you've said before, it'd be a lot better, the memory would be much better 2.5 years ago than it is today? Would you agree with that?
I would agree that my memory would be better than.
And you'd agree that the defendant's, his SUV, it's not a big SUV, it's not like a Tahoe or something, it's a pretty small SUV inside, correct?
In relation to other SUVs, it would be on the
Absolutely.
small side.
Yes. And you would agree that the car seat, as it was, the rear-facing one, was within inches of the driver. You would agree with that, correct?
I can't remember how close it was at this point, but just based on the photographs I've seen.
Okay.
I mean,
Have you, and I don't know, because, we haven't talked, have you seen the pictures of the car seat at the scene?
I have not, and
Okay.
I
And that's
don't
understandable?
want to.
Yes, ma'am, that's understandable.
I've seen the seat reinstalled
Mhm.
with the mannequin in it, and it appears to be close to both of the seats.
Yes, ma'am. Now, and that car did not have a backup camera or anything like that, correct?
No.
And have you gone back, by chance, have you seen where, I don't know, you didn't watch any videos, so you don't remember whether the defendant or not talked to you about Cooper telling him school or answering school to him right before he left? That
I don't
Chick-fil-A?
remember
Okay. All right, and just one other question on this topic. I believe you stated that you got back in town on June 9th, but is it possible it was June 7th or June 8th that you got back in town?
That was an estimation I made based on just kind of looking at my text and trying to figure out when I got back.
Okay.
I don't think I went immediately back to work as soon as I got back.
Right.
So I have to look at the text to know for sure.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 933. All right, Ms. Taylor, showing you State's Exhibit 933. Again, does this look like a text message between the defendant, his number, and your number, 5128?
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it does.
And does it appear, looking at that, refresh your memory, that you came back into town June 7th, and then June 8th, y'all were in bed, and then you're going to go to church?
It looks like that. I guess that would have been Saturday.
Okay. All right. Your Honor, I would tender State's Exhibit 933.
Just whatever prior objections have been made during the course of this litigation, Judge.
Admitted.
All right. Just some questions, ma'am, about specifically your conversations in there with the defendant in the interview room back on June 18th, okay?
Okay.
Do you need a break?
I'm really not sure.
Your Honor, I think it may be a good time for a break.
We can do the break.
Thank you.
Close your notepads, keep your note, no conversation.
Let's all rise for the jury, please.
We'll be in recess.
Okay, we'll be in recess.